The other piece of information that we're going to share with the board this evening has to do with our facilities again. Where are we at? We had a referendum, if you recall, this past year, a year ago now, and the issues dealing with space continue. So we have, when we look at the school district, a strong school district. We've got pride in our schools. We have an excellent student body, K-12 or pre-K-12. We have excellent staff, supportive parents, and the like. But when we look at the school district, we have an issue dealing with space. Take a look at the schools in 318. We have a proud tradition, and I think that in elementary schools, for example, I have the privilege and the opportunity to walk into schools and see kids in classrooms. Young kids, delightful experiences that they have in the schools in 318. Math and reading scores are above the state average. We're a partners in education in the arts area. Foster grandparents. Walk into the Cohasset School and also at Forest Lake. You'll see grandparents in there every day, some of them the same. It's like they're going to work. They're delightful, they support kids, and it's truthfully encouraging to see the community involved in their schools. We have a new math program that aligns with the K-12 curriculum. In the middle school, all kids tested above average in reading. The sixth graders scored 18.8% higher than the state average. Big Fork also saw gains in student reading scores. We have a new program in the middle school called STEM program. Science, technology, engineering, and math.
Thank you.
Then we also put an A in there. So we have a STEAM program, if you want to look at it that way. Science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. So when we look at the program at the middle school, it starts students at that age group into a different design as to how, in fact, we've been providing instruction in the past. And we'll speak more to that down the road. So we've got the engineering program at the middle school, student-driven technology projects, all positive experiences in 318. When we look at the high school, 89% graduation rate. The 89% graduation rate, which also includes the ALC. At Big Fork and also at the high school in Grand Rapids, you've got college in the schools, you have the post-secondary options. We're the only rural district to have an IB program. And in fact, it was the first in this state, correct, Mark?
Yes, we were.
First in this state to have an international baccalaureate program. We can see all kinds of positive experiences for kids in 318, and you can see that as demonstrated right there by that, with that picture. Take a look at our schools. We have a strong tradition. We're proud. We're proud of our schools. We're proud of the tradition of providing good opportunities for kids in the school district. Take a look at Cohasset Elementary. Part of that building, by the way, was built in 1920. This is a picture of Cohasset in the 50s. This is a picture of Cohasset right now. The only difference that you can see, you've got a tree there. So when we look at that, the school again is the same as what it was in the mid-50s and prior to that in some cases. Take a look at what was going on in the classroom here in the 50s, and then take a look at the congestion right now in elementary school with kids in the hallway. Now, someone would say, well, why are they laying down in the hallway? They're being involved in a learning experience that should take place in the classroom. But since there isn't a space issue there, or there is a space issue there, they're out in the hallway. That would be true of all of our buildings as far as elementary schools. In other words, the schools don't meet our needs when it comes to space. We can continue our proud tradition. We need to act When we take a look at kids in the hallways, every day if you were to walk into an elementary school, you'll see that. In every one of the elementary schools, you'll see kids in the hallways, part of that learning experience. We talked about the grandparents, foster grandparents. Here's one lady here reading to a child. You can see the same is true over here. In other words, we appreciate, like I said just a minute ago, of that foster grandparent program. Students with teachers. This wasn't ginned up either. So this takes place every day in our schools as far as teachers working with kids outside of that classroom and in a hallway setting. That's also there. This is Forest Lake. We talked about that this past year also. I think this is a good slide. What it does is it talks about, speaks to the issue that's urgent for the school district. 26% increase in student enrollment in the elementary schools over the past decade. A large part of that had to do, again, with the all-day, everyday kindergarten. Districts forced to move elementary schools to different schools. In other words, what we have are supposedly district boundaries, in a way, attendance areas, neighborhood schools. That's not possible here because of, again, the space configurations that we have in the school district. The middle school. The middle school was built for around 800 to 900 kids. We now have 1,200. Part of the reason for that is that the elementary schools were crowded, necessitating the fifth graders to go to the middle school. If you happen to have been at the Veterans Program this past Friday, the place was jammed. 1,200 students. Can't fit them all in the bleachers or in the seating areas there. They're on the floor. That's in addition to your fine arts programs with the instrumental program and also your vocal music. Those kids weren't up in the stands. They're again out on the floor there. So when we look at the district, leased space, we have leased space at St. Joe's. We have leased space at a church basement, First Lutheran. We have leased space at the IRC. We have 14 portable classrooms. 14 portable classrooms is the equivalent of a 2-section elementary school. So we have an elementary school that's in portables, but they don't have a gymnasium. They don't have a cafeteria. It's cramped the outdoor play space. As a result of 14 portable classrooms, we, I think, again, talk about the need for space in the district, and I believe that that's evidenced by that number. Go to Southwest, go to Forest Lake, go to Murphy. All of those buildings now have portables, and again, if you're to drive by, you can see that. One of the items I think that we probably don't highlight enough has to do with the world we live in today. The world is different today. Safety is a paramount and a preeminent concern of this school district. We can't provide for that safe, secure environment with buildings that were designed in the 20s and the 50s as far as access points. We do have video surveillance. We do have doors that are locked after the school day starts. We do require you to come to one main entrance. But if you're to take a look at how buildings are designed today that has safety in mind, our buildings don't meet that same standard. The other part of it is if you're to take a look at Murphy Elementary, for example, drive up to Murphy Elementary at the end of the school day and see the congestion around that building. People driving down an alley, parents parked 2 blocks away, their kids' buses, parents, kids. It's a recipe for disaster, to be honest with you. The buildings were built 58 to 94 years ago. We have a growing need for maintenance. We'll be talking about facility upgrades in the future here, as far as the maintenance part of it. All costs to the school district. Take a look at the schools. 1970, the high school was built. For the most part, the principal of the high schools here, I would make the assumption that we're thinking, well, that's the new building. Well, it's not the new building. It was built in 1970. So when we look at the high school, or now the newest building that we have is the middle school. But the middle school was built 12 years ago. The other part of it, I think on this continuum, when we talked about where are we at with facilities when we talked last year, well, what about Big Fork? Well, the high school was built in Grand Rapids. In 1988, you had the Big Fork School built. You had renovations to the Big Fork School in 1998. So when we look at the district, we don't look at it in a way of identifying one component of the district. We look at it overall. So when we look at facility planning, it isn't, in quotes, in one area of Grand Rapids or in Big Fork, it's across the district. So we can see that the building needs go across in the continuum. And right now what we have is a space issue in our elementary schools in Grand Rapids and Cohasset that we need to address. Well, I'll tell you, when we look at the school and the community, it's the community's responsibility to provide for good quality programming and good facilities. I'd invite anybody to walk into our elementary buildings with me and take a walk around. We can see that the structure of the buildings hasn't changed since the mid-50s. If you're to walk into an environment that's warm, that's light, that's encouraging for learning, those schools don't meet that standard. Now, are we providing good opportunities for kids? Absolutely. But are we meeting the needs of kids today because of the space configuration? I'd suggest that we're not. So when we look at whether it be Murphy or Southwest, to address the issue of space, we then added those portables. But the portables also, again, don't complement the building because we didn't add a gymnasium, we didn't add additional cafeteria space and the like. We're fortunate, I believe, in the Grand Rapids area to have a fairly vibrant economic community. And what we now see is other industry coming in, and this industry is also going to be looking for employees, and those employees are going to have children, and they're going to want those children to go to schools that represent the year 2016 and meeting the needs of kids in that setting. One of the items I think that the broader community became aware of is that we have 4,000 kids in the school district. We've had an increase in enrollment, but we also have a different component of kids in that configuration that we didn't have 20 years ago. In other words, 600 and some kids have the designation of special education. Also, children that are medically fragile. Medically fragile kids weren't in schools 20 years ago. They are today. So what we need to do as a community is to invest in the schools. We need to have a dialogue. One of the reasons why we're talking about this again this evening is for us to stimulate that dialogue, not only among board members, but also with the community at large. Since 2010, the district's had listening sessions. Since 2010, we've surveyed the community members. Since 2010, we've researched best educational practices. Since 2010, we've examined the facilities as far as maintenance needs and the like. And since 2010, we also polled the community. We polled the community last summer regarding their feelings toward their schools. And I believe it was 89% had trust in the school district and support for our educational programs. We're attempting to engage the community. As you can see here, we're soliciting and looking for feedback. We're looking for involvement. And what we're asking for the board to do, again this evening, is to push this dialogue into the community and to, again, attempt to address the community's needs, listen, and hear. What we need to do is to take a look at whatever the best plan is, not the easiest one. We need to meet the needs of students and educators, attract families and businesses to the area. We need to be flexible so that we can meet our future needs. We believe that when we look at durability, it's not just for the next 5 years, it's for the next 50. And we want fair value for our taxpayers. We need to identify and have dialogue about what our options are. The educational, the health, the safety, the security objectives, the building configurations that we have. We talked about K-5 buildings. What are we going to do to repurpose 2 of the existing facilities? The grade configuration and the attendance boundaries, again, then are all up for dialogue. And then the funding of those facilities. For outreach, we're attempting to go to staff, to parents, and the students, our community partners, whether it be the chamber or other community organizations, our neighbors, your neighbors, the people that live next to you in the neighborhood that you reside. Big Fork and our townships, other school districts as far as our involvement with them, to talk about collaborative and ongoing partnerships, and our business leaders. How will we know when we're there? I think when we have staff and parents involved. And I think that that's the key that we have ahead of us. If we have the staff and if we have the community involved, then we know that we're going to be ready for a building issue. A funding plan that meets the expectations for fairness and value, that the alternatives have been investigated, that the community members in school, without children in schools, see the value of good educational programming. And then we're ready to answer those tough questions.